Okay. This past week, an orca breached itself, a wild orca on the east coast of Florida. Palm Coast to be specific. So it's above Orlando, but still the Atlantic Ocean, right? Usually most people are considering orcas around the Pacific Northwest in this corridor, but there are lesser known individuals and populations that not only stay in the northeast coast, so around like Boston, Maine, Prince Edward Island, and to the east, as well as the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico has their own pod of killer whales. When this orca beached itself, breaching is jumping, beaching is actually bringing itself onto the sand, and it ended up dying there. The local sheriff's department, SeaWorld, and the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission helped to remove the body as well as perform a necropsy, which is basically an autopsy for a whale or any other cetacean. Unsurprisingly, the necropsy showed that she was old and filled with disease, which is usually the case for a beached whale or any other cetacean, but we also know that her skeleton will be put on display at the Smithsonian Museum. I don't know what the origin is for people saying that you can't call orcas killer whales is, but I want to hear it from somebody who thinks they have the answer. As much of a joke that this comment is meant to be, orca is not the government name for the species. At least not the only one. This is a CSV file that I requested from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration that has the history of recorded killer whales in captivity. And as you can see, in species, killer whale and orca are cited. So at least the United States government does acknowledge both. The tank you're seeing right now is Mainland, and this is Mainland in Niagara Falls, Ontario. A lot of you may have seen this video. It's a video that's across so many platforms, it's gotten millions of views. And the whale that's featured in it is Kiska, or was Kiska. She was the last killer whale in captivity in Canada. As you absolutely heard in my verbiage there, I did say was, as Kiska died within this past week. My heart absolutely goes out to everybody that worked with her and anybody that throughout the years came to love her. For the rest of us, her death literally marks the end of an era. The first killer whale that was ever captured and displayed in Canada happened in 1964 in British Columbia. Every subsequent year after 1965, you could either find a publicly displayed captive killer whale or a company that was capturing orcas along the British Columbia coastline. That is until March 9th of 2023. The era of captive killer whales in Canada is over.
There are some of y'all who just love orcas, and I'm just like, why?
Hello to the excitable scientist. I am the Orca Man. In the video I'm stitching, you're describing two particular orcas, port and starboard, who are absolutely feasting like kings in the South Atlantic Ocean. For you, port and starboard exhibit the highest predatory nature of the species. When I think about killer whales, I think about Luna, who was a stranded whale on the west side of Vancouver Island who made friends with the community. I think about Talakoa, who carried her baby for days and morning. Think about Springer, a small whale who was separated from her pod and then through a joint effort by the United States and Canada was not only reunited with her pod, but is now living healthily with calves. I think about Old Tom building a symbiotic relationship with humans. I can completely understand how it's easy to look at killer whales and be overwhelmed by their predatory nature. See, for me, it is the stories that I've shared and so many others that are the reason why I love killer whales. So, the animal you see below me is a killer whale, right? You know them, you love them, you're scared of them, but did you know that they also look like this? Let me introduce you to the Type D killer whale if you haven't been yet. Seeing these orcas in the wild, let alone being able to research them, has been incredibly hard. One of the first papers that's ever come out about this eco type of killer whale has recently shown that they're the result of a lot of inbreeding. I will link the paper in my bio later today, but if you're looking for a short grasp of information that gets it pretty concise, go over to the Northern Naturalist's Instagram page. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Orca Man. Have a good day. The tank you see above me right now is the, I believe, smallest current killer whale tank that exists. And the lone orca you see swimming here is Lolita or Tokitae. Now, Toki has been at the Miami Seaquarium for like 4 to 5 decades now. And just recently, on March 30th, the Miami Seaquarium, the Whale Sanctuary Project, and Friends of Toki have put out a release saying that they're going to try and move Toki to a sea pen in her home waters of the Pacific Northwest. Now, from what I understand, they have financial backing for at least the beginning part of the project. I'm not sure if it's ongoing. By the way, one of the other things that needs to happen in order for this to work or like be greenlit is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration needs to sign off on it, and they haven't yet. Now, this one's a hard one for me because I don't want to see Toki live out her days in net. but she's an extremely old killer whale, and she's been at the Miami Seaquarium for like 4 to 5 decades. As somebody with no veterinary or training experience, my opinions on the matter aren't valid in any way, but what I can do is research as much as I can and listen to the people who are, and hopefully relay that information to you. Like anybody in this situation, I want the best for Toki. That would be fantastic. Figuring out what that is, of course, is the larger question. So, for that, I'm the Orca Man. Below here will be the beginning of my playlist for all of my videos about Toki going forward. I'll be looking to talk to people and otherwise to get information. Let's give her the best name the life we possibly can. The whale you see above me is Lolita, or Tokitae, and she has been making waves in the news recently. A few animal rights activist groups have come together with the Miami Seaquarium and the Dolphin Company, which is now the owner of Miami Seaquarium, to put together a release and a retirement plan for Lolita in her home waters in the Pacific Northwest. Now, a little bit about Lolita. She is one of the southern resident killer whales, which is a group of killer whales in the Pacific Northwest that is considered critically endangered. And she's one of the last whales in captivity currently that was part of the capture era of the 1970s. As you can see here, she was captured on August 8th, 1970 in the Penn Cove captures, where they round up basically the entire southern resident killer whale population. This of course means that right now Lolita is well into her 50s, so transport as well as acclimating to a new space is going to be incredibly hard, particularly for an orca who hasn't been seen to adapt to change very well. I'll be updating this playlist as much as I can as the more information I get, and I'm planning to talk to a few people that are involved. So follow me, I'm the Orca Man, and I'll keep you as involved as I can. So I'm not exactly which hole you're referring to, but I believe it's called the blowhole. Orcas, like humans, are mammals, which means a whole bunch of different things. One of them is that they breathe air. For us humans, we breathe through our mouth and our nose, and with orcas and other cetaceans, they breathe through a blowhole. The blowhole is just on the top of their back, just behind their head, and in front of their dorsal fin. Now, breathing does pose a bit of a problem when you need to do it only once every so often because you spend the most of your life underwater. And it's because of that that these orcas breathe very, very large breaths once every so often. So yeah, I believe that's the hole on starboard's head you're referring to. Is that snow? Nice. Dorsal fins on orcas can serve many purposes. For orcas, like most marine animals, the fins serve as a sort of stabilization within the water, mainly. Now, for male killer whales, they also serve another purpose entirely. As warm-blooded mammals, killer whales need to internally regulate, and it means that their testicles need temperature regulation all the time in order to be able to produce viable sperm. So the reason that male killer whale dorsal fins are larger than females is because all of that extra space is filled with different arteries and different blood vessels that end up cooling off all of the internal organs that help with reproduction. My sincerest apologies if this taints anybody's viewing of killer whales in the next little bit. Okay, we're hitting the time of year again where this video is going to come up, and so I just want to give a little bit of thoughts about the whole situation as the Orca Man. You can't see it here, but above my head I cropped out that this video is made by Dylan Brayshaw. Now, Dylan Brayshaw is a surfer, photographer, videographer out of New Zealand where this took place. He was at the beach when the swimmer in the water, Judy Johnson, was swimming, and people saw orcas coming through and decided to throw his drone in the air. Now, this is back in December of 2018, and before anybody who hasn't seen this whole video, Judy Johnson is completely okay and was fully safe during this interaction. In watching this video a number of times, you can see that the two whales beside me have something in their mouths, and a lot of people have commented on this. Now this is an eagle ray, if you can see it. If you've seen the Secrets of Whales documentary on Disney+, then you'll recognize this photo. Like some orcas in the Pacific Northwest eat salmon and others eat seals, the ones in New Zealand eat eagle rays. Now you may have noticed that I didn't say they eat people, because they don't, and it's important to know that. While swimming with orcas is a thing that many people have done in many different places, it is extremely important to understand the rules and regulations in whatever location that you're going to be interacting with them is. This is not just for your safety, but it's also for the safety of the whales themselves. Different places around the world have even distances for boats that are absolutely necessary to make sure that people aren't putting whales in harm's danger where they have been hurt before. I'll be linking Dylan's full video of this in my bio, so you can go there and find it if you want. And otherwise, if you see videos of orcas interacting with people or otherwise in a number of different ways, reach out to me. I am here, and anything else, I'll do my best to try to assess the situation. I am the Orca Man, and have a good day. So, orcas in the Mediterranean have been messing up boats between Morocco and Spain. If you see this thing right here, this is an orca underneath, and this is a rudder of the boat. This is the thing that helps steer it. Nobody currently has any idea why this is happening, but it's been consistent for like 3 years now. The actual thing that I came on to tell you about is that orcas helped smuggle drugs. Yeah, so there was an operation that was moving hashish from Morocco to Spain, and because there was a bunch of reports of orca attacks going around, they just called in the Coast Guard of Spain and was like, hey, our boat's been attacked by orcas, to like circumnavigate the fact that they were like doing some weird moves in the ocean, and it also made it so that if they got towed in, they wouldn't be as questioned. When they finally caught the guys in the operation, it was 172 kilos of hashish and over like 62,000 euros. I'm not sure if it was clear before, but like they weren't being attacked by orcas, they just said they were. So yeah, that's the story of how orcas are involved in international drug crime. And that's all for the Orca Man today.
Killer whales. Did you ever think about where that name comes from? It's killer of whales. The two whales you see to my right are gray whales, and they're about to be the subject of these California Transients lunch. Looks something like this.
Blessed be our new founding fathers.
Now the two orcas you see here are not the only ones that are there. Orcas are called the wolves of the sea because they run in packs, or rather, they run in pods. This one was 31 orcas deep, the California Transient killer whales. This video was shot by Evan Brodsky, who's the main videographer for the Monterey Bay Whale Watch Company. After many hours, these two gray whales ended up getting away, and this is the first predation that we've seen on two adult gray whales in the Monterey Bay area. If you're looking for a longer video, I got 20 plus minutes linked in my bio, and if you're looking for more orca content, stick around. Do you have beef with 30 killer whales? Of course you do. You just saw them mess up two gray whales' day for no good reason. That being said, you might not like me very much. I am the Orca Man. I'm here to throw some perspective on the situation. 30 killer whales are California transients. They eat marine mammals for sustenance. This is the first time that we've seen them attack two adult gray whales. It's usually calves, which would make you hate them more. Before we go demonizing killer whales, I want to look at ourselves. You may have heard of Shamu. Shamu is the orca that SeaWorld built their entire orca experience things off of. The name is the Shamu Show. When Shamu was caught, we killed her mom and then put her in captivity and then shipped her more than 1,000 miles away for entertainment. If you want to see better in the world, my antithesis to it is to do better. Check out your local ecology communities and try to see if you can volunteer. Or talk to your local politicians. That's how captivity stopped. All right, California Transient killer whales. What does that mean? Let's start with the word transient. Now, what you see above me is a list of ecotypes of killer whales. This list in particular was created by NOAA in the United States, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, that classifies different killer whales into subgroups called ecotypes that are not subspecies, although this one might be a subspecies in time, we don't know yet. But they are known specifically for their differences in physiological looks, as well as different behaviors, so dietary and otherwise. Transients, like you may have guessed in the beginning, eat whales and other marine mammals, whereas other groups of orcas will specialize in different things, like eagle rays you see here. So the California Transients are mainly a group of killer whales around Northern California that specialize in eating marine mammals and are hosted around the California water. If you want to understand the stark differences between these ecotypes, they don't intermix. So the California Transients won't ever come in contact with residents, which is incredibly interesting. I hope you learned something. Killer whales in captivity usually have flop fins. So do some whales in the wild. The question I got recently was, why do some whales have flop fins that are really bent over like this versus others who are not quite as bent like this whale here? Now, some of you may have guessed this already. Males and females have different sizes of dorsal fin. The males are exponentially larger because they have to deal with testicle regulation with temperature. But what that also means is that there's more surface area on male dorsal fins to flop over. So very simply, structurally, they're made out of the same stuff, right? It's cartilaginous tissue, but with the males, because theirs is so much larger, it has the weight to flop over more. Whereas for female killer whales, it would only be a slight bend. With that, I'm the Orca Man. Stick around if you want to hear more. The first killer whale that was ever captured in Canada happened because the Vancouver Aquarium wanted a scale model of a killer whale at their facility. Now, I won't say that any killer whale capture was ever kind, but this one was particularly gruesome as they caught it with a harpoon. The they I'm referring to there is actually two specific people. It's Sam Burridge and Joseph Bauer.
And in particular, because Burridge didn't want Bauer to shave his beard. What do I mean by that? So Murray Newman, who's the head of the Vancouver Aquarium, right? He contracts Burridge and Bauer to go to Saturna Island and stay on their camp with a harpoon mounted to the side of the coastline that they were on. The big plan here was to wait until a pod of orcas went by, because there was a ton of orcas going by at the time, harpoon one of them so that they could go underwater and take photos of it all around, and then use those photos as reference to build a scale model for the aquarium. It was day 57 when they decided to call it quits, and when they called it quits, both Burridge and Bauer kind of got their stuff together, and Bauer was getting ready to shave to go home to his girlfriend and look all clean and proper. Burridge, who's tailed to look like Hemingway at this point in time, was saying absolutely not, took Bauer's shaving kit and threw it over the cliff that they were camping on into the water. It's been 57 days without whales. This one time as Bauer looks over to watch his shaving kit go into the ocean, he sees a pod go by. At this point is where Burridge and Bauer go down, man the harpoon, and aim for one of the whales in the pod going by. And they hit one. What they don't realize is that the whale remains alive. So they realize they hit a live whale here on Saturna Island, and there's people coming down from the island and starting to shoot at the whale, and they're trying to get them to mitigate that because they see the pod holding the little whale that they hit up. They call Murray Newman, basically say we can't kill this whale, what should we do with it? Murray tells them to bring it back to Vancouver. Now this is Saturna Island here, and Vancouver's all the way up there. They ended up towing the whale who would be called Moby Doll back that entire way, which is unbelievable. That's an over 4-hour trip, especially for a whale that had a harpoon in its back. If you're interested in reading about this story in particular, the whole thing is tailed in Mark Learon Young's The Killer Whale Who Changed the World. It is a wonderful book that tells the entire story. My name is The Orca Man on here, and I hope you have a good day. Stick around if you want more orca stories.
There are very few places in the world where you can just casually come upon whales. My partner and I went to West Vancouver to a place called Lighthouse Park, and as we went up to one of the lookout spots, we saw a humpback. This one's name is Malachite, I'm pretty sure, but when we showed up, it was lobtailing, which you'll see in the next video, and I'll go quiet so that you can hear the extent of the slaps. It's unbelievable.
So, killer whales in the Strait of Gibraltar have just sunk their third boat in about 3 years. Everybody that was on the boat is safe. The boat didn't sink until they ended up towing it back to shore. I believe it was the Spanish Navy that brought it back. Now, Under the Desk News reported about this and said that White Gladis, who had potentially gotten attacked by a fishing vessel or pleasure craft, is now waging a simple war against the boats there and teaching all of the other pod how to do it. Now, the reason that we have to say maybe is because we don't entirely know. But one thing that is incredibly impressive is that the name Gladis, and the reason that we call the whale White Gladis, is very particular. Any whale or orca near the Iberian Peninsula that makes some kind of ruckus with regard to boats, that goes up and attacks them or otherwise, is labeled as a Gladis whale. Right now, there are about 14 Gladis whales that are recorded. If you go to the link in my bio, I have a link to the organization that has titled them Gladis Whales and lists out all of their traits as well as the other orcas and catalogs for the Iberian Peninsula. Now, know that there's a bunch of other orcas around this area, and so if you run into orcas, the 99.999% chance that you'll be absolutely fine. It's just these particular whales in particular instances that are doing it. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Orca Man. This is what I do. I talk about whales. If you wanted to hear more about whales and anything that happens with this going forward, stick around. So here's a crazy fact. We know every killer whale that exists in the Pacific Northwest. Every orca that goes by, we have a catalog that goes back into the 1960s and 70s that tells us who they are, how we've identified them, and otherwise. This usually happens through photo identification of their dorsal fins. That's the way that we are able to identify and keep track of killer whales without having some sort of a tag attached to them. Now, the way in which that works, and the way in which that came about, rather, that's the more important part, was because the government of Canada and the US, but mostly Canada when it started, needed a tally of how many killer whales there were in the Pacific Northwest in order to regulate the captive killer whale industry. So, they needed to know how many there were so that they didn't capture too much. That ended up happening anyway. The southern resident killer whales are now at 74 animals, which is way too low, and they need salmon, so that's its own thing. But the reason that we know who killer whales are and the reason that all that research started was because people were out there capturing them. That was because people needed to regulate, the government needed to regulate how much was sustainable. That ended up stopping really quickly. Within 10-15 years after the research began, then people stopped capturing whales. But it's wild that is what it took in order for us to be like, oh my god, we know who they are. And now, me and everybody else loves them. I'm the Orca Man. I had a dream about getting my hair cut last night, so that wasn't fun. But stick around if you want orca stories, and I'll have a good day. So the Gladis Whales, the group of killer whales in the Iberian Peninsula who have now sunk their third boat in 3 years. In the last video I made about these whales, I mentioned that their name is very particular, and the fact that they're all called Gladis whales. Any whale that attacks boats in the Iberian Peninsula is called a Gladis whale. Why are they named Gladis? Well, naturally they were named Gladis because of the vernacular name Orca gladiator that they were given because they were attacking boats. This screenshot and the previous one are from a website that has all the information on Gladis whales that's currently linked in my bio. But as you can see, some of their names, fantastic. This is white Gladis, that's black Gladis, this is gray Gladis, this is small Gladis, adorable. Whenever talking about this instance, even if it is regard to the color-coded Power Ranger whales, it is worth noting that even if you're in the Iberian Peninsula, there is a 99.999% chance that you are going to be okay. And as I have called killer whales whales throughout this video, this is a great reminder to everybody on the internet that orcas are dolphins. Dolphins are whales. Not all whales are dolphins, but all dolphins are whales. And I am the Orca Man. I'm on here, I'm on Instagram, I talk about killer whales, that is my dig, and if you want to hear more, stick around. Beautiful. Bottom. Da, 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 da.